The sun was glaring through the tall glass windows of the high-end downtown bank as Keanu Reeves quietly stepped inside. Dressed in his usual worn-out jeans, faded black t-shirt, and an old baseball cap, he looked nothing like the wealthy celebrity everyone knew. The marble floors glistened under the bright lights, and the sound of clicking heels and muffled conversations filled the air. No one paid him much attention, except for a few judgmental glances from sharply dressed customers who couldn't help but notice his casual attire. At the counter stood Ryan, a well-groomed, arrogant bank teller who prided himself on spotting low-class customers from a mile away. As Keanu approached, Ryan gave him a dismissive look, barely hiding his smirk. "Excuse me," Keanu said calmly, his voice polite as always. Ryan raised an eyebrow, looking him up and down. "Yeah?" Ryan sneered. "Lost or something? The public bank's down the street." Keanu just smiled faintly. "I need to make a withdrawal." Ryan scoffed, shaking his head in disbelief. "A withdrawal? From here? You're joking, right?" Without saying a word, Keanu pulled out a sleek black card from his pocket and placed it on the counter. Ryan's eyes widened slightly, but he quickly composed himself, picking up the card with an exaggerated show of disinterest. "Well, let's see if this thing's even real," Ryan muttered, swiping it through the machine with a smirk. As the system began processing, Ryan couldn't help but glance at Keanu with a mocking grin, fully expecting it to decline. Ryan leaned against the counter, his fingers tapping impatiently as the machine processed the card. He glanced over at Keanu, still wearing that calm and patient expression, which only fueled Ryan's arrogance further. A couple of wealthy-looking customers whispered to each other, clearly entertained by the unfolding scene. One man in a crisp navy suit chuckled softly and nudged his wife, who glanced at Keanu with a hint of disdain. Ryan couldn't resist a mocking comment. "You know, most people who come here dress like they actually belong. You just stroll in looking like a washed-up drifter. Seriously, dude, where'd you even get this card? Found it in a dumpster?" Keanu didn't flinch, simply giving a slight nod, as if he hadn't even heard the insult. His calmness only seemed to aggravate Ryan more. Just as Ryan was about to say something else, the machine made a soft beep, signaling that the transaction had been approved. Confused, Ryan looked at the screen, and his smug grin faltered. His eyes widened as he stared at the digits on the monitor, his face slowly draining of color. 322 million, Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible. He blinked, his hands trembling as he tried to process the number. It couldn't be right. How could a guy dressed like that have such an astronomical amount in his account? He refreshed the screen, desperate to find a mistake, but the number remained unchanged, mocking his judgment. A few customers noticed Ryan's shocked expression and started whispering, trying to see what was happening. The man in the navy suit, who had been smirking earlier, now furrowed his brows with a hint of unease. One of the other tellers noticed the commotion and leaned over to see the screen, her eyes going wide as well. Ryan cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure, but his confidence had vanished, replaced by a nervous gulp. He glanced at Keanu, who was still standing there with that same serene expression, not a hint of pride or arrogance on his face. Ryan swallowed hard, desperately trying to think of something to say to cover his embarrassment. But before he could utter another word, the bank manager, an older, stern-looking man in a tailored gray suit, approached, noticing the unusual silence around the counter. "Ryan, what's going on here?" he demanded, giving a sharp glance at Keanu, clearly judging his appearance as well. Ryan stammered, unsure how to explain himself. Sir, it's just this man's account, it's..." He hesitated, not wanting to admit his mistake. The manager frowned, stepping closer to look at the screen himself. The moment he saw the balance, his eyes widened, just like Ryan's had, and his jaw tightened. Keanu remained calm, not saying a word, as the entire bank seemed to fall into stunned silence. The arrogance that had filled the room just moments ago had completely dissipated, replaced by confusion and guilt. The manager quickly adjusted his tie, trying to maintain professionalism despite his obvious shock. "Mr. Reeves," he finally said, his tone suddenly respectful. I apologize for any inconvenience. Please allow us to assist you properly." Keanu gave a small, polite nod, but remained silent, his calm demeanor never faltering. Ryan, on the other hand, looked like he wanted to disappear. He could feel the weight of judgment from everyone around him, realizing that his arrogant assumptions had just destroyed his credibility in front of both the staff and the wealthy clients. The tension in the bank was suffocating. Ryan's hands still trembled as he tried to act like nothing had happened, but his pale face gave him away. The manager, desperately trying to save face, gestured toward the VIP lounge. "Mr. Reeves," he said with a forced smile, "please allow me to escort you to our private lounge. We can complete your transaction there with the utmost comfort and privacy." But Keanu simply shook his head, his calm eyes fixed on Ryan. "I'm fine here," he replied gently, making it clear that he wasn't about to move, just because they had realized who he was. Ryan could feel his heart racing as he glanced around, noticing how every single person in the bank was now openly staring. A couple of customers who had previously smirked at Keanu now looked at him with a mix of guilt and admiration. The woman with the expensive handbag clutched it tightly, clearly uncomfortable with how wrong her initial judgment had been. Desperate to redeem himself, Ryan cleared his throat, forcing a shaky smile. "Mr. Reeves, I truly apologize for the misunderstanding earlier. I didn't realize—" Keanu interrupted with a slight raise of his hand, his expression still calm but piercing. "You didn't realize what? That not everyone wearing simple clothes is worthless?" Ryan's face flushed with shame, and the manager shot him a glare, silently warning him to keep quiet. Keanu took his card back and slipped it into his pocket, but his words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Ryan tried to muster some form of professionalism, but his arrogance had completely evaporated, replaced by pure embarrassment. "Sir, I didn't mean to judge, but you did," Keanu said, his voice quiet but firm. "And it's not just me. How many others have you treated like they're beneath you just because of how they look?" The room fell even quieter, and the manager looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole. A few customers shifted uncomfortably, clearly reflecting on their own biases. Ryan couldn't look Keanu in the eye, his face burning with humiliation. Just then, a young teller from the far counter, who had been silently observing the whole incident, approached with a hesitant smile. "Mr. Reeves, I just wanted to say that your work has always inspired me. Thank you for being so down to earth." Keanu offered her a small, grateful smile, nodding politely. "Thank you," he replied softly. Her simple, genuine compliment contrasted sharply with the arrogance Ryan had displayed earlier, and it only made the teller's mistake seem more glaring. The manager cleared his throat again, clearly trying to take control of the situation. "Ryan, step into my office, now," he ordered, his tone cold and final. Ryan hesitated, glancing at Keanu one last time, but he knew his fate was sealed. Without another word, he walked toward the manager's office, his head hanging low. Keanu watched him go, his expression still composed but thoughtful. The entire bank remained unusually quiet, as if everyone was silently processing what had just happened. As Ryan disappeared behind the office door, whispers erupted among the customers, their once judgmental eyes now filled with regret and respect. Keanu took a breath, adjusted his cap, and gave a slight nod to the young teller who had complimented him. Then, without another word, he walked calmly out of the bank, leaving behind an atmosphere heavy with reflection and guilt. As Keanu stepped out onto the bustling sidewalk, the crisp air hit his face, but his expression remained calm and composed. He took a deep breath, glancing back at the bank for just a moment before walking away. Inside, the atmosphere was still tense, with customers exchanging uneasy glances and murmuring among themselves. The manager, now in his office with Ryan, was pacing back and forth, his frustration barely contained. "What were you thinking?" the manager snapped, his voice low but sharp. "Do you have any idea what you just did? You humiliated one of the most respected and beloved celebrities on the planet, in front of everyone." Ryan swallowed hard, his eyes fixed on the floor. "I didn't know. I mean, he didn't look." "That's exactly the problem," the manager interrupted. "You judged him based on his appearance. You didn't bother to treat him with basic respect. And now, we're going to be dealing with a PR nightmare because of your arrogance." Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He knew there was no excuse that could justify his behavior. Meanwhile, back in the lobby, the customers who had witnessed the entire scene continued to talk amongst themselves, some expressing disbelief, while others looked genuinely ashamed. Outside, Keanu walked calmly down the street, his thoughts reflecting on the incident. It wasn't the first time he had been treated poorly based on his appearance, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. Yet, he couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness for how judgment had become so deeply ingrained in society. Just because someone didn't look wealthy or important didn't mean they deserved to be treated like dirt. A few blocks away, Keanu stopped at a small coffee shop and ordered a simple black coffee. As he sat by the window, his phone buzzed continuously. Messages from friends, his team, and even fans who had somehow already heard about the incident. He sighed, scrolling through the notifications, seeing posts and videos of the encounter already going viral. The headline read, "Bank teller mocks Keanu Reeves, instantly regrets it when $1 million balance appears." Keanu couldn't help but smile faintly at the irony. He hadn't intended to teach anyone a lesson that day, but it seemed like the world had taken one from his silence and composure. As he sipped his coffee, a message from his PR manager popped up. "Hey Keanu, video's blowing up everywhere. Let me know if you want to address it publicly. Hope you're okay." He put his phone down, staring out at the city beyond the glass. Maybe this incident would make people think twice about judging others. Maybe it wouldn't. But for him, it was just another reminder of how easily people could forget the value of kindness and humility. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows on the streets, Keanu finished his coffee and left a generous tip on the table. He nodded at the barista, who gave him a respectful nod in return, clearly recognizing him, but choosing not to make a scene. Outside, life moved on as usual, but Keanu knew that for some people in that bank, things would never be the same again. The lesson had been given, loud and clear, without him even having to say much. The truth was simple. Money didn't define a person's worth, and neither did appearances. Respect was something that should be given freely, without conditions. And today, whether they liked it or not, they had learned that from a man who had mastered the art of humility.